Hello, Namaste and Salam. Welcome to lecture 5 of week 1 of this course on Essentials of Environmental Geotechnology, a Geological Perspective. In the past 4 lectures, we have seen how Anthropocene is making it mandatory for us to design for 1000 years. What is critical zone, how it needs to be protected, and specifically in critical zone, the Waddos zone that needs a special attention because that is the natural barrier. And in the 4th lecture, we delved into the differences between traditional geological engineering geotechniques and environmental geotechnology. In this final lecture, we would synthesize, combine everything together and see how can you become a green geologist, a green geoscientist, a green engineer. So, we'll just synthesize our core themes of week 1 from Anthropocene, Anthropocene to critical zone to Waddos zone, and then the difference between traditional versus environmental geotechnology. And in this week, we also went through what are the different guidelines, what is the ethics and principles through which a geoscientist or a geological engineer needs to work so that his reporting, his assessment, his analysis is in compliance with regulatory guidelines. Yeah. So, first we defined what is environmental geotechnology. It is an applied field, it is an interdisciplinary field. It takes components from geomechanics, from hydrogeology, from soil geology, from chemistry, in order to protect our environment, specifically protect critical zone. It is quite interdisciplinary. This subject is interdisciplinary, and also the need for it is the transaction between human ambition and geological reality. To deal with that conflict arising from human ambition and geological reality owing to Anthropocene, as in over exploitation of resources, we need environmental geotechnology. So, the key takeaway that you should keep in mind is this field is about managing earth materials for long term environmental safety, and by long term I mean 1000 years. Next, the critical zone is the skin of the earth, ranging from 10, 20, 30, in some region up to 100, 150 meters. This is the region starting from the top of vegetation canopy. If this is your vegetation canopy, from here up to the depth where you have active running water, or to the base of weathered rock material, or above fresh bedrock. This is your critical zone. This is what we need to protect. Why? Because we have our soil here. On soil we grow our food. If the soil is contaminated, the yield would go down. In West Bengal, there is arsenic contamination and arsenic poisoning. Why? Water is polluted, and the rice which is eaten a lot takes in more arsenic from the soil and water. Furthermore, this is the uh, biogeochemical reactor that sustains human life and existence. Also, you have all the soil layers here. So, the most important or direct processes which are affecting human life are present in the critical zone. It needs to be protected at any cost. In lecture 3, we went through what are the regulatory framework. We follow Environment Impact Assessment 2003 notification guidelines, which gives us the geological baseline data that needs to be ascertained and the failure models. Also, most of the time the failure of EIA is the failure of the predictive models that we have developed. Two most important components here are polluter pays principle and precautionary principle. Polluter pays principle says it is the responsibility of the polluter to pay for all the mitigation, remedial and monitoring measures which are necessary. Precautionary principle says, as mentioned in the previous lecture, the cost of consequences is pretty high. So, when you are unsure, when you are not sure about, or if there is a lack of geological data, then you need to over design, you need to over stabilize, you need to over protect. That is the precautionary principle. And we have a dedicated court, a tribunal, and we are the third nation after Australia and New Zealand for all the projects which may adversely affect the environment. And also these designs and these impact assessments are for a longer duration. In the fourth lecture, we went through how traditional engineering geology or geological engineering differs from environmental geotechnology. While traditional engineering geology, geological engineering mostly deals with stress and strains, the deformation, and our end goal there is to have structural stability, structural integrity. In environmental geotechnology, our end goal is to contain, isolate, contain and isolate all the contaminants, containment of the contaminants, and we need to design for 1000 years. And one simple metric or one of the variables that is used for these landfill liners is conductivity should be less than 10 raised to the power 9 meter per second. And also, what is the role of chemistry? As mentioned in the previous lecture, just a change from sodium smectite to calcium smectite can collapse the whole clay structure and increase the conductivity manifold, thus rendering the clay liner useless. And we need to design zero discharge systems. That implies you need to have a liner, multi-layer liner, redundant systems to arrest downward movement of leachate. Furthermore, you need to have collection components so that the leachate does not accumulate and increase the gradient. You do not want that. Furthermore, you also want to cover these landfills so that there is no water seeping through the waste. So, we have moved from shifted from build safely to contain the contaminants forever, and 1000 years is forever. One example here would be, some people have this hypothesis that the reason behind the collapse of Roman civilization was the water ducts. So, pipes that they were using to bring water to Rome was made of lead, which eventually led to a lot of poisoning, a lot of illnesses in Rome, and that led to decline of Rome. That is one of the hypotheses. So, these processes are really slow. They can take centuries, but their consequences can never be negated, and that is the whole crux of environmental geotechnology. So, in the coming lectures, we would, or in the next week, first we will see the geomaterial framework, the geological material framework. What are the strength attributes, what are the material, physical and chemical properties that we ascertain for environmental protection against contaminants, against hazardous contaminants. So, a final brief of week 1, this domain is interdisciplinary. We take in cues from biology, chemistry, physics. Again, and also one more highlight from week 1 is critical zone is the reactor that sustains us, and in that specifically Wadow's zone is the natural barrier, and our job is to make sure it remains strengthened, or rather augment the natural filter that we have. Regulation and ethics, these are the codes that we have to work with. Here the data, the ground data comes in forefront, because from that ground data we design our systems, and the differences between, or the shift from traditional geological engineering towards environmental geotechnology. So, week 1, or rather in week 1, one key takeaway can be, it is geology, the geomaterial, regulation and long term ethics, and this is what will make you a green geoscientist. Not just construct, not just excavate, but to contain. Yeah. So, as a geoscientist, you would investigate the site, assess the risk based on the data, site conditions. You will implement all the ethical standards, all the compliances. You will bridge geology, engineering and societal issues, or the ecology of that area before a project is being undertaken. So, in the end, I would want to say this subject is more about management, long term management, the long term stewardship of any construction or any activity which is taking place in the critical zone. In the critical zone, that is needed because we owe it to our coming generations, and we need to be transparent, and it also need to align with sustainable development goals. So, as geologists, we protect the subsurface for future generations, that is intergenerational equity. So, this is one task that we can do. We would have separate quiz for week, but this is one task you can ponder over, do for week 1. Yeah. In the next week, we will look into the geomaterial framework, the geomaterial characteristics that affect ground behavior, contaminant flow. Please ponder over these questions. These are some references that you can go through, and this ends week 1. I hope you are gaining insights into this wonderful field. If you have any question, you can write to me. I will see you in week 2. Thank you. Thank you for your time and patience. Good luck and goodbye.